My fiancé said, I need a no-contact break to find myself. I replied, I support your journey. Then I found her dating profile, moved all her belongings into storage, and changed the locks. She was left banging on my door when she returned with her new boyfriend. I remember the moment Marta asked for a no-contact break as if it was yesterday. It wasn't the words themselves, it was how casually they came out. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the afternoon light filtering through the blinds, painting everything with a dull, golden hue. We'd been together for 3 years, engaged for just under 2, and up until that moment, everything felt like it was on track. But that afternoon, my whole world started to slip. Darren, she said, her voice soft, almost apologetic, I think we need some time apart. Just for a bit. I need to figure some things out, you know? It's not about you, I promise. It's about me. The way she said it made my stomach twist. She was looking at me, but her eyes weren't really seeing me. She was focused somewhere else, probably on whatever thoughts had been swirling in her head for who knows how long. Okay, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I was already holding it in, the pressure building behind my chest. So, what does that mean? She paused, fidgeting with her hands, twisting the ring on her finger. I just need space, Darren. To think. To work on myself, you know? I've been doing a lot of reflecting lately. I'll stay with Ashley for a while. She's been doing this wellness thing, and I think it might help me. Her wellness thing was another way of saying she was staying with a friend who was into self-help gurus and cleansing retreats. The type of person who would tell you that your life needed to be more centered. Maybe she was right. I had noticed her becoming more distant over the past couple of months. But I hadn't thought it would come to this. Not a break. Not like this. I didn't argue. I didn't ask questions. I just nodded, feeling the weight of the words pressing down on me. Okay, I said again, forcing a smile. If you think it'll help. I couldn't bring myself to tell her I was terrified, that my mind was already spinning with questions. What did this mean for us? Were we done? Was this the beginning of the end? She stood up and gathered her things. I didn't even ask if I could come with her. I just watched her move around the apartment, picking up her things in a slow, deliberate way. She seemed to be in no rush, as if she was already checked out, mentally, emotionally. As she packed her bag, I felt a dull ache in my chest. This wasn't supposed to happen. We were getting married in 6 months. I had everything planned out. The venue, the flowers, even the guest list. It was all supposed to fall into place. And now she was walking away, asking for space. She leaned down to kiss me goodbye, and I could barely force myself to react. Her lips brushed mine, but it didn't feel like it used to. It felt like a goodbye. I didn't say it. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, staring at her as she pulled her bag over her shoulder. I'll call you when I'm settled, she said, her voice barely audible. Okay, I repeated. That was all I could say. She left, and I stood there, still, the silence of the apartment swallowing me whole. The days that followed were a blur of routine. I kept myself busy with work, pushing aside the thoughts that kept intruding. Every time I came home, it felt emptier. The space where she had been was now a cold echo. And every time I went to bed, I kept thinking about what she was doing, where she was, and who she was talking to. And then, for days later, my phone buzzed. It was a screenshot sent by Andy, a colleague at the office. I opened it without thinking, expecting a joke or a work-related update. But instead, it was a dating profile. A profile with Marta's face on it. She was smiling, her profile description reading, freshly single, seeking passionate chaos. The words hit me like a punch. Freshly single. That one phrase twisted inside me. She had called this a break, but here she was, using the time to look for someone else. I felt my heart sink. I stared at the screen for a long time, unable to do anything but breathe. I didn't respond right away. I didn't need to. I already knew the truth. That night, I sat alone in the living room, Marta's empty space next to me, my phone buzzing in my hand, a cold pit of betrayal opening inside me. The day after I saw Marta's dating profile, something inside me clicked. It wasn't anger at first. It was a sharp, cold clarity. I didn't have time to feel sorry for myself, to wallow in confusion or heartbreak. I had been methodical all my life, a planner, a problem solver, and this situation, no matter how personal, was something that needed to be dealt with like any other problem, efficiently. I told myself I wasn't going to react in a way that would make me seem weak. I wasn't going to let her see that she'd shaken me, that she'd made me feel small. No, I would make sure she never had the chance to think she could walk in and out of my life like this. I knew what I had to do. I picked up the phone and called a moving company. The guy on the other end was friendly enough, but I wasn't interested in small talk. I told him I needed everything moved out of my house, everything Marta had touched, everything that had once belonged to her. Sure, no problem. We'll have a crew there by 10 a.m. tomorrow, he said. The timestamp on the calendar, the one we'd filled out for wedding plans just a month ago, was still sitting there on the fridge. Marta's dress, 11 a.m., it read. How absurd that it now felt like a joke. The next morning, the movers arrived on time. I didn't offer them coffee. I didn't give them pleasantries. I simply stood there with a clipboard, making sure everything was being handled with the precision I required. Every single item she had was going. Her clothes, her shoes, the books she'd left behind, the toiletries in the bathroom. I made sure each item was photographed, cataloged, and packed away into boxes. Even the sentimental stuff, small notes, birthday cards, went into one sealed box. Nothing would be left behind to remind me of her. I would erase her from every inch of this place. The movers worked quietly. I watched them as they moved through the apartment, systematically dismantling the life I thought we'd built together. The process was cold, but oddly comforting. It was like putting up walls around my heart, making sure nothing could touch me anymore. I didn't want to leave any room for doubt, for her to have the chance to come back and act like nothing had happened. Once everything was packed into the truck, I took out my phone and sent Marta a simple text. Everything's in storage. The key is at storage unit address. I blocked her number. Don't contact me. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was indifferent. I was doing what needed to be done, following the script I had written in my mind. I was erasing her, every last part of her from my life, from my routine. I changed the locks, one last step in making sure there was no chance she could ever come back without my permission. I stood there for a moment, looking at the front door, at the small things she'd left behind. A picture frame, a scarf. Nothing important, nothing irreplaceable. But it was hers. And now it was gone. The phone buzzed in my pocket. I hesitated before opening the text. It was from Marta. Darren, what the hell? Where's my stuff? I stared at the screen. It felt so simple, so transactional. A woman I had loved, a woman who had once shared a future with me, was now just a name on a phone screen, a problem that needed solving. I didn't respond. Instead, I blocked her number. I didn't need to hear her excuses, her reasons for why she had done what she had done. I wasn't looking for closure anymore. There was no point in trying to understand something that didn't deserve understanding. I had removed her. Done. I sat down at the kitchen table, looking out the window as the afternoon light faded, thinking about how quiet everything had become. My life was now my own again. It wasn't exactly how I'd imagined it would be, but it was mine. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel regret. I didn't feel anger. I just felt free. That night, I slept like I hadn't in weeks. It wasn't even a week later when she showed up at my door. The knock was sharp, insistent, like someone was trying to break in. I wasn't expecting her, not really. But I knew it was coming. I had just gotten out of the shower, standing there in my towel, when the knock echoed through the apartment. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt the familiar pang of nerves creep up my spine. But I'd done what needed to be done, and I was no longer going to be controlled by whatever emotions Marta decided to throw at me. I pulled on a t-shirt and went to the door. When I opened it, there she stood, Marta. And behind her, a man I didn't recognize, tall, broad-shouldered, with a confident smile. He had that kind of energy that makes people want to be around him, the kind of guy who was just always on. Marta didn't look like the woman I had known. There was something different about her now, something sharper, more defensive in the way she stood, arms crossed, her lips pressed tight together. Her hair was in a messy ponytail, like she hadn't bothered to fix herself up for this confrontation. You changed the locks, she said, her voice low but tight with frustration. What the hell, Darren? I didn't flinch. You're not welcome here anymore, Marta, I said calmly, my hand resting lightly on the door. I made sure everything you left behind was packed up. It's in storage. The key's at storage unit address. She stared at me for a long beat, trying to gauge if I was being serious. The man behind her shifted uncomfortably on his feet, and I noticed how his eyes darted back and forth between us. I wasn't in the mood to entertain her games. So you're just going to pretend like none of this happened? Marta shot back, her voice rising a little. You think you can just erase me? Like it's that easy? Like all the years we spent together mean nothing? I felt the tension in my chest tighten, but I forced myself to stay calm, to stay composed. No, I said, I'm not pretending. You made your choices. And I made mine. I'm not going to keep getting hurt by someone who doesn't care. I could see her breath catch in her throat. I wasn't angry, but I wasn't offering her any comfort, either. I was done being a safety net for her. And who's this? I asked, looking past Marta at the guy standing behind her. He looked like he wanted to step in, but I wasn't having it. Marta glanced over her shoulder at him before giving a tight, defensive smile. This is Jace, she said, as if that explained everything. Jace? I repeated, nodding slowly. Good to know. He extended his hand with a forced smile. I don't know what the problem is, man. Marta's just trying to move on. I didn't even let him finish his sentence. I don't need your help, Jace, I said firmly, not taking his hand. This is between me and her. And unless you plan on stepping aside, I'm not sure there's anything more to discuss. Jace looked like he might protest, but Marta cut him off. She turned back to me, her face flushed with the heat of her emotions. You think you're in control now, Darren? She snapped. You think you've won? You don't get to erase me, or anything we had, just because you can't handle a little space. A little time to think. I don't owe you any more explanations. I'm done with this. But I'll make sure you remember me, one way or another. Her eyes flicked toward Jace, then back at me. She reached for the envelope she was holding in her hand, her fingers trembling. I'm taking this, she said, and don't think for a second I won't get petty about it. She grabbed the envelope off the counter, obviously the storage key, and with a quick glance at Jace, turned to leave. As she moved past me, she stopped in the doorway, turning back to face me. You'll regret this, she muttered, almost under her breath. I opened the door wider, standing in front of her, blocking her path. I was done. No, Marta, I said, my voice calm, almost detached. I won't. I'll never regret protecting myself from someone who doesn't even know what she wants. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the hurt flash in her eyes. But there was something else too, something darker, something I hadn't noticed before. She wasn't just angry. She was scared. And I wasn't going to be the one to fix it for her anymore. With one last glance, she grabbed Jace's arm, and they turned to leave. The door clicked shut behind them, and for a moment, I just stood there, letting the silence of the apartment swallow me whole. But it wasn't over. I could feel the storm still brewing outside, out of my control. What Marta didn't know was that this was the beginning of something much bigger than either of us had anticipated. She had left, but in the silence that followed, I felt my resolve harden. I was done. A few days passed after Marta's unexpected visit, and I thought, for a moment, that things might settle. I blocked her number, erased every trace of her from my life, and yet, I knew better than to believe it was really over. People like Marta didn't just walk away quietly. She wasn't going to let this go. I was right. It started small as I expected. First, it was the utilities. I came home from work one afternoon to a missed call from the electric company, then the gas company. The phone bill, too. All of them were trying to get in touch about overdue payments. I'd always handled these bills, had always made sure everything was paid, even when Marta and I shared them. But now that we weren't together, I wasn't about to keep paying for services that were under her name. It was petty, sure, but I had to admire the precision of it. She wasn't just trying to inconvenience me, she was making a statement. I'd seen that look in her eyes when she left the other day. She wasn't just angry, she wanted revenge. I wasn't going to let her get away with it, though. I didn't pick up the phone the first time. I didn't respond to her calls or messages. But after the third bill, I had had enough. I grabbed my phone, sitting down at my desk with a calm that felt almost unnerving. I contacted each company directly, all of them one by one, removing Marta's name from everything. I told them I was the sole account holder now, and that the payments would be made under my name. Each conversation was the same, with a polite but insistent tone from the customer service reps. They asked why Marta wasn't handling the payments anymore, and I explained, as simply as possible, that she no longer lived at the address and I would be responsible moving forward. I didn't need to get into the specifics of why. They didn't need to know the details of our split. I sent off the final confirmation email to the electric company and sat back in my chair, taking a deep breath. That part of the game was over. Then came the texts. And, of course, they came at the exact time I expected them to, just as I was finishing up for the day. Darren, what the hell is going on? Marta's first message read. I didn't respond immediately. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of a quick reply. I wanted her to stew, to realize that this time, I wasn't playing along. When her name lit up on the screen again, I clicked on her message. You think this is funny? You're screwing with me. It wasn't funny. It was necessary. But I didn't need to explain myself to her. Not anymore. I let her messages sit there for a few more minutes, the silence between us growing thicker. Then, her final text appeared. You're spiraling. I'm telling everyone. You're losing it. I'll make sure they know what you're doing. I laughed a little to myself, even though there was nothing funny about it. It wasn't the first time she'd used that tactic, trying to turn people against me. I knew Marta had already been spreading her version of the story to anyone who would listen. She liked to manipulate the narrative, twist things in her favor. But this time, I wasn't going to let her do that. I grabbed my phone, opened the text, and typed a short but decisive response. Do what you need to. The truth is, I don't care. Your games don't affect me anymore. And then, just for good measure, I blocked her number. That night, as I went to bed, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't a sense of victory or triumph, but more of a quiet, steady relief. I didn't need her, and her attempts at retaliation weren't going to hurt me. I knew exactly how to handle it now. The next few days were an odd mix of silence and quiet tension. I kept seeing her name pop up in texts from mutual friends. People checking in on me, asking if I was okay. It was like they could sense something was off, even though I hadn't told anyone about the split yet. Marta had been working hard to make me out to be the villain. It didn't matter that I had been calm, that I had kept things civil. She was the one who had walked away, the one who had asked for the space. She was the one who had lied. But now that she was the one hurting, She needed someone to blame. And of course, I was the easiest target. The real test, however, came when I started to get messages from people at work. Friends, coworkers, even a few family members, all saying the same thing. Marta says you're spiraling. I knew this was her next move. She was trying to make it look like I was losing control, trying to turn everyone's perception of me upside down. At first, I felt the familiar sting of betrayal. I had no idea how far she would go to paint me as the villain in all this. But then I realized she was only hurting herself. She wasn't going to destroy me, not this time. I crafted one message, and I sent it to everyone who had reached out, a carefully worded explanation of the situation, laying out the facts with precision and clarity. There was no emotion, no drama, just the truth. Marta and I are no longer together. I'm fine. I'm focusing on myself and moving forward. That was it. Short and sweet. After a few days, the messages stopped. The people who had reached out didn't ask any more questions. The narrative I had laid out was solid, and even Marta's biggest supporters knew it. By the time the weekend rolled around, Marta's small attempts to retaliate were dead in the water. The calls and texts had stopped, and I felt something close to peace return to my life. It wasn't easy, but I was done being the one who always gave in. This time, I was in control. I thought things were finally settling down. It had been a few weeks since the last confrontation with Marta, and everything seemed to be falling into place. I was getting back into my routine, work was busy, and I was focusing on myself, the way things should have been all along. But just when I started to feel like the storm had passed, the next wave came crashing in. It came in the form of an email, the subject line simple, matter of fact, claim for reimbursement, Marta Turner. I opened the message, expecting something related to the last few things I'd handled, utility bills, some odd charge, but instead, it was a formal request. A demand. She was asking for $4,200 for furniture investments and her share of the deposit on the place we'd lived in together. The language was cold, legalistic, as if she were presenting it like some business transaction instead of a personal one. But it was clear, she was trying to extract money from me under the guise of a financial obligation I had never agreed to. I stared at the screen for a long time, the words blurring together as my mind processed it. The audacity. After everything, the breakup, the coldness, the lies, the hurt she had caused, she thought she could come after me for money like nothing had happened. I wasn't angry. I was just done. I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just about a financial claim. This was about her trying to control the narrative again, trying to get the last word in a way that would make me look like the villain. But I wasn't going to give her that. Not this time. I wasn't going to play her game. I closed the email and immediately pulled up my personal accounts. I needed to go through everything. Every single thing I'd paid for since we'd moved in together, everything she had asked me to cover. There was no way I was going to let her walk away thinking she could manipulate me like this. Not anymore. For the next few hours, I worked methodically. I dug through old receipts, invoices, bank transfers. I cataloged every dime I had spent, keeping meticulous records of every single payment I'd made that she had benefited from. I had it all, and I was going to make sure she knew it. By the time I was done, I had created a detailed spreadsheet. It was precise, unyielding. It showed every financial transaction between us, from the rent payments to the furniture we had bought, to the utilities and shared expenses. I added up the total, $4,200, the exact amount she had requested. But then, I added a few things of my own. I attached the moving fees I'd paid when I cleared out the townhouse, a few months' worth of utility bills she had left behind, and the expenses related to fixing damages to the apartment after she had decided to just leave. That added up quickly. In total, I had a list of items and costs that put her in debt to me for $6,700. I drafted a simple email to respond, keeping the tone as neutral and professional as possible. I wasn't going to get emotional or petty. That wasn't my style anymore. Subject, response to reimbursement claim. Marta, I have reviewed your claim for $4,200. However, after going through our shared expenses and the outstanding balances, I must inform you that you actually owe me a total of $6,700. Attached is a detailed list of the payments I have covered for you, including the moving costs and additional expenses incurred due to your abrupt departure. I will consider this matter resolved if you drop all claims and acknowledge that you are no longer entitled to any further financial support from me. If I do not hear from you within 7 days, I will proceed with legal action. Best regards. Darren Turner. I attached the spreadsheet, and without hesitation, hit send. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen for a few moments. That was it. The ball was in her court now. And no matter what she said, I was no longer going to let her control the narrative. I didn't hear from her right away. In fact, the next few days passed with no response. No phone calls, no emails, nothing. But I wasn't worried. She would respond, eventually. When the response came, it was in the form of a single line. You really think I'm going to pay you? I'm not a fool. Keep dreaming. It was a short, cold dismissal, but I wasn't surprised. This was the same Marta who had walked away without a word, without a second thought. But this time, I had something she couldn't ignore. I called my lawyer the next morning and set up a meeting. I wasn't going to let this slide. I wasn't going to let her get away with using the legal system as a weapon to try and drain me. A couple of weeks later, I received a formal letter in the mail from Marta's attorney. It was a poorly written, overly dramatic demand for $4,200, insisting that I settle immediately or face litigation. I could barely suppress a smile. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about power. She had tried to play me, and now she was facing the consequences. I didn't even bother to respond directly. Instead, I called my lawyer, and within 24 hours, we had sent back a letter that outlined the full financial discrepancy, along with the evidence I'd gathered. It was a clean rebuttal. My lawyer even added a note, reminding Marta's attorney of the risks of pursuing a case based on an incomplete understanding of the facts. That was the last I heard from her. A few weeks later, the case was closed. There was no further communication, no requests, no legal threats. It was over. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled, feeling a sense of closure wash over me. She had tried to make me the villain, to turn the tables on me after everything that had happened, but I wasn't playing her game anymore. The saga was done, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was free. It had been a few weeks since the legal drama with Marta had faded into the background, and for a while, I felt like I could finally breathe again. But life had a way of throwing curveballs, and I should have known better than to think I could truly escape the fallout. I didn't realize how far Marta was willing to take this until I started noticing the subtle changes at work. At first, it was small. Meetings I should have been included in? I wasn't. Emails I should have received? They were suddenly filtered out of my inbox, buried in a chain of responses that didn't involve me at all. I didn't think much of it at first. I was busy with projects, and in the high-pressure world of engineering, missing a few things here and there wasn't all that unusual. But then I started getting the whispers. "Hey, you okay?" Sam from the team asked one morning as he slid into the seat across from me in the break room. He was a nice guy, easy to talk to. But there was something in his eyes, a hesitancy, that made me pause. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep things casual. "Just the usual." He frowned, shifting his coffee cup back and forth between his hands. "I don't know. I've been hearing things. Some people are saying you're struggling a bit, that you're not as stable as you were before." I froze, a tight knot forming in my stomach. "Who's saying that?" He glanced around the room, lowering his voice. "I don't know for sure, but it's been floating around, you know? Like the higher-ups are worried. Maybe it's just talk, but I thought I'd let you know." I stared at him, my pulse quickening. This was no coincidence. I knew who was behind it. Marta. She wasn't just content to ruin my personal life. No, she was going for the jugular. She was trying to make me unstable, to make it look like I couldn't handle my responsibilities. After everything, she was bringing the fight into my professional world. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but I didn't show it. I didn't want Sam to see me unraveling. I forced a tight smile, trying to shake off the anxiety gnawing at my insides. "I'll handle it," I said, trying to sound confident. He nodded, clearly unconvinced, and left me alone to stew in my thoughts. That day, I kept my head down, pushing through work as best as I could. But the whispers didn't stop. In meetings, I noticed the subtle glances, the quick exchanges between my colleagues when I walked into the room. The more I saw it, the more I realized just how much it was affecting me. The way Marta's words, whatever they were making their way into the office. And it wasn't just the team. Even my manager, Rob, started giving me strange looks. He seemed distant, almost like he was second-guessing everything I said. By Friday, I had had enough. I was done with the passive-aggressive atmosphere. I scheduled a meeting with Rob, our director of operations. I was going to handle this head-on, just like I had with Marta. When I walked into Rob's office, he didn't immediately look up from his screen. The tension in the air was palpable. I had to clear my throat to get his attention. "Rob, we need to talk." He blinked and glanced up, taking off his glasses. "Oh, Darren, what's up?" I sat down across from him, leaning forward, the weight of my decision settling on my shoulders. "I've been noticing some things around the office lately. Meetings I'm left out of, emails I'm not copied on. People seem to think I'm not handling things well, and it's affecting my work." Rob shifted in his chair, but I could tell from the way he averted his gaze that this wasn't a coincidence. "I know you've been through a lot recently," he said cautiously, as if choosing his words carefully. "But, well, there have been a few concerns about your recent performance. The higher-ups are a little worried. Just a little. Maybe you're overextending yourself." I felt my stomach churn. There it was. The indirect way of saying that I wasn't doing well, that I was slipping. But I didn't give him the satisfaction of letting my frustration show. "Who's concerned, exactly?" I asked, my voice steady. He hesitated for a second, clearly uncomfortable. "It's just a few people. You know how things are. We just want to make sure everything's okay with you, Darren. I didn't even try to hide my smirk. I'm fine. The work's getting done. Nothing's changed. I leaned forward a little more, my eyes narrowing. But I'm getting the feeling that someone's been spreading things about me. Someone who doesn't know what they're talking about. Rob looked away, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. I could tell he wasn't going to come out and say it, but it didn't take a genius to figure out that Marta had somehow poisoned the well. Darren, Rob started, but I cut him off. You don't have to tell me, Rob. I already know who's behind it. He froze, his eyes widening slightly. I had caught him off guard. I'm not stupid, I continued, my voice cold now. Marta's been making her rounds, hasn't she? Spreading rumors, undermining my credibility. Trying to paint me as some kind of liability. Rob didn't deny it. The way he shifted in his seat told me everything I needed to know. I'm handling it, I said firmly, standing up. I'm going to take care of this. I don't need anyone else's interference. But if it happens again, you'll know exactly where to find me. I left Rob's office with a renewed sense of purpose. The game Marta had started, trying to drag me through the mud, wasn't going to work. It wasn't just about my personal life anymore. Now she had taken it to work, and I wasn't going to let her destroy everything I had built. I didn't care how deep she had buried herself in the company's ranks. I wasn't going to let her win. The next morning, I went straight to HR. I had everything I needed, emails, dates, timestamps, my own set of receipts. I laid it all out, calmly and methodically, just like I had with Marta's absurd claim earlier. It didn't take long for HR to open an investigation. A few days later, I was called in for a meeting with my manager, and to my surprise, they had already taken action. Marta was removed from several key projects, and HR had informed me they were investigating her for retaliatory behavior. When she found out, the fallout was swift. I didn't care, though. All I cared about was the feeling of reclaiming control. Reclaiming my life. And that was exactly what I did. A few months had passed since I'd wiped Marta from my life, both professionally and personally. Things had been quiet, and I began to think that maybe she had finally moved on, that maybe she had found her own way without dragging me into it. I focused on work, reconnected with friends, and allowed myself to start healing. But, as I should have known, things weren't going to stay peaceful for long. I heard about her through the grapevine first. A casual comment from Sam at the office. Marta's back together with that guy, Jace. She's posted all about it on social media. At first, it didn't faze me. I wasn't looking for updates on her life. In fact, I was glad to hear she was moving on. Maybe that meant she wouldn't be trying to sabotage mine anymore. But then I heard more. Her life with Jace wasn't just moving on. It was falling apart. I wasn't one to snoop, but curiosity got the better of me, and one evening, I found myself scrolling through her social media posts. Her pictures told a different story than what she'd been trying to sell. The perfect couple, the adventures, the sunsets, it was all there, just like I'd seen before. But this time, it was more brittle, more forced. The posts came less frequently, the smiles seemed more strained, and Jace's presence, once confident and easy, now looked awkward in the photos. It wasn't hard to see. They were falling apart. I wasn't sure what to make of it. Part of me was glad to see her facing the consequences of her actions, but another part of me, the part that still remembered who she used to be, felt a pang of sympathy. That sympathy didn't last long. The real collapse came when I started hearing rumors about her. People at work had been talking whispers, but still loud enough to catch my attention. Marta and Jace had moved in together, but it wasn't the fairy tale it had seemed like on social media. They were struggling, barely getting by. Jace had been fired from his job in the outdoor gear division of our corporate partner company, and without his income, things were tight. Really tight. Her social media presence stopped. Completely. Then came the phone call. It was late one evening when my phone buzzed. I saw the name before I even picked it up, and I froze. Marta. I hadn't spoken to her in months, not since the day I blocked her number after sending the final text about the storage key. This time, there was no message. Just a call. I let it ring once, twice, and then answered with a calm I didn't quite feel. What do you want? I said, keeping my voice steady. There was a long pause on the other end, followed by the unmistakable sound of her shaky breath. I could tell she wasn't calling to talk about the weather. She wasn't calling to ask how I was. I need help, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I stood there in my living room, the words hitting me like a punch to the chest. I had never imagined I'd hear those words from her. She, who had walked away from everything so easily, now asking me for help? My mind raced. What was I supposed to say to her? After everything? I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice even. Help with what? We're behind on rent, she said, sounding defeated. Jace lost his job, and we can't make ends meet. I don't know what to do, Darren. I don't have anyone else to turn to. I didn't respond immediately. The silence between us felt deafening. I wasn't sure what she wanted from me. Sympathy? A handout? Something to fix her mess? After a long beat, I spoke. You're calling me now? I asked. After everything? You're calling me for money. I know, she said quickly, almost apologetically. I know this is a mess. I wouldn't ask if I had any other choice. But I don't. You should have thought of that before you walked away, I cut in. You didn't want my help then. You made your choices. You have to live with them now. Her voice broke a little, and for a brief moment, I could hear the desperation in it. Please, Darren. I know I hurt you, but I didn't think it would come to this. I didn't think we'd be in this position. I closed my eyes, leaning against the wall. She was trying to pull me back in, trying to use my empathy against me. But I wasn't the person I had been when I'd first met her. I had changed. I had grown stronger than that. I can't help you, I said, my voice colder than I wanted it to be. I'm not doing this anymore, Marta. You've made your bed, and now you need to lie in it. There was a long pause. I thought she might hang up. I thought she might start yelling, blaming me, making me the bad guy. But instead, I heard nothing but silence. I'm sorry, she whispered finally, the words barely audible. I don't know what else to do. And with that, the call ended. I stared at my phone for a long time, feeling a strange mix of relief and finality. It was over. She was done. I was done. The last remnants of our past had crumbled away. A couple days later, I saw the aftermath unfold. A few mutual friends started reaching out, asking if I'd heard the latest. Turns out, things between Marta and Jace had deteriorated quickly. They had moved into a cramped rental outside the city, struggling to make ends meet. The social media facade they'd built up for months had fallen apart. I knew what came next. It wasn't just the rent they couldn't pay. Marta had always relied on me, to clean up her messes. But not this time. As for me, I moved on with quiet grace. The saga had ended. Marta and Jace were left with the wreckage of their own making. And as for me, I kept my peace, knowing I had closed the door for good. What had begun as an entangled mess of love, betrayal, and manipulation was finally over. I was free. And somehow, that freedom tasted sweeter than any of her apologies ever could. The days after Marta and Jace's fall from grace were peaceful. Too peaceful, almost. It felt like everything had settled into a new rhythm, one I hadn't anticipated. The noise, the drama, the emotional chaos, it was all gone. I had a new sense of clarity, a calm that I hadn't known in years. Life felt manageable again. My routines had returned to normal. Work was going smoothly. I even started hitting the gym more regularly, something I hadn't had the energy for in months. And slowly, I realized I was happy. But the true shift, the moment that made me realize just how far I'd come, happened when I ran into Marta. I hadn't expected to see her again. After everything had settled, I thought I'd never have to face her again. But life, as it always does, threw an unexpected curveball. I was at the grocery store one Saturday afternoon, grabbing a few things for dinner, when I spotted her in the produce aisle. She was standing there, looking at the apples, her back to me. I froze, unsure of what to do. My heart rate picked up, my stomach twisted. The thought of facing her again after all that had happened wasn't something I had prepared for. But as if sensing my presence, she turned, her eyes locking with mine. For a split second, I saw that familiar spark in her eyes, the one that had drawn me to her in the first place. But there was something else, something different about her now. She looked tired, worn, like the life had been drained out of her. I didn't know what to say. The words caught in my throat. I hadn't expected to feel this way, especially after everything she had put me through. But there was a sense of detachment now, a space between us that couldn't be bridged. She wasn't the same woman who had once been my fiancé, and I wasn't the same man who had loved her. She opened her mouth to speak, but then paused, like she wasn't sure what to say either. It wasn't the confrontation I had imagined. There was no anger, no bitterness. Just a strange, heavy silence hanging between us. Hey, she finally said, her voice softer than I remembered. Hey, I responded, my tone neutral. There was a long pause. I noticed how different she looked. Her hair was darker, shorter. She had lost weight, and her skin had that dull, washed-out look people get when they're overwhelmed. She wasn't the confident, carefree woman I had once known. The woman in front of me was someone struggling, someone who had lost their way. She shifted uncomfortably, as if she didn't know how to start this conversation, or even if it was worth having. I realized, standing there, that I didn't know how to interact with her anymore either. It felt like we were strangers, two people who had once shared everything but now had nothing left in common. I saw the things you posted, I said finally, breaking the silence. About Jace. How's he doing? She shook her head, her eyes dropping to the floor. It's over, she whispered. It's been over for a while. I don't know what I was thinking. I just kept going. And I think I ruined everything. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for her. Part of me wanted to tell her that she had brought it all on herself. But I couldn't muster the energy for anger anymore. The truth was, I didn't care enough to be angry. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. I took a deep breath. It's not my problem anymore, Marta. And you need to figure out what you're going to do next. I can't keep carrying your mistakes. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time in a long time, I saw the vulnerability in them. She wasn't the woman who had walked away from me. She wasn't the one who had taken everything from me and left me with nothing. This woman, standing before me, was lost. She was trying to pick up the pieces of a life she had shattered herself. "I know," she said quietly. "I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know that. I'm sorry. For everything." The apology didn't feel like enough. But it wasn't my place to make her fix everything. I had already done the work of healing, of moving on. "I know you are," I said, my voice steady. "And I'm sorry, too, for everything that happened between us. But we can't go back. It's over, Marta. And that's okay." She nodded, her shoulders sagging as if the weight of everything she'd been carrying had finally become too much to bear. "Yeah, it is. I guess I just needed to hear that." We stood there for another long moment, the silence between us no longer uncomfortable, but peaceful. I realized that, in that moment, I didn't need closure. I didn't need any more explanations or apologies. The distance between us, both physical and emotional, had created the space I needed to truly move on. "I'm glad you're taking responsibility for what happened," I said, turning to walk down the aisle, ready to finish my shopping. "But you have to do it on your own now. That's how it works." She didn't follow me. She didn't say anything else. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of her presence, didn't feel the pressure of unresolved anger or longing. It was over, and I was free. As I finished my shopping and walked out to my car, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. Marta was no longer part of my story, and for the first time, I could look forward to writing the next chapter without her in it. I wasn't the same person who had loved her, who had fought for a relationship that wasn't meant to be. I had healed. I had rebuilt. And I was finally at peace.